Hey, hey, and welcome back to Miss Kitty's Wild West Adventures. This is part 3 and the final part of my series on the Idaho State Penitentiary. If you've missed the first 2 parts, I will link them right over here, so be sure to, or over there, be sure to check those out. But today we are going to be talking about probably the saddest or most traumatic part of Idaho State Penitentiary, and that is death row. Specifically for death row inmates. Now, I know in part 1 I said I was going to talk about 2 death row inmates, but when I was researching which 2 to focus on, I found another 2 that are it's kind of a 2-for-1 deal. So I'm going to also talk about them as well. So we're going to talk about 4 in total. So buckle up, huckleberries, and stay tuned. Okay, so there have been a number of people on death row at Idaho State Penitentiary. Of them, only 10 of them, their sentences were actually carried out, all of them by hanging. The first was near the original territorial prison building. 6 of them were in the Rose Garden. 2 of them were on Yard 2, which was then where the outlaw ball team practiced. And only 1 was in the newly constructed gallows room, which brought the executions indoors away from prying eyes and the sometimes freezing weather. Some of the condemned received that 11th hour reprieve, that blessed phone call from the governor that saved their life, if not their soul. The first man we're going to talk about is not one of them, though he is also technically not one of the 10 that were executed. Douglas Van Vleck was put on death row for the premeditated kidnapping and murder of his ex-wife, Mildred Hook, and the cold-blooded killing of 2 police officers, Fontaine Cooper and Henry C. Givens. Van Vleck was sentenced to hang on December 10, 1937 at 12:10 a.m. The night before, he was visited first by a reverend who administered the last sacrament, and then by his parents, who were allowed to visit him through the open door of his cell. At 7:12 p.m., his mother gave him a final hug, whispered something in his ear, and then departed. It was then that Van Vleck broke the grasp of the officers who were watching him and scrambled his way up to the top of the 1890 cell house. He sat up there, 3 floors high, for 30 minutes, silently, while the guards went to get a fire net. At 7:42 p.m., before the net arrived, he yelled out,
"I have the right to choose the manner in which I die."
And at that point, he launched himself from the rafters and came crashing down on the concrete floor below. The prison doctor examined him and determined that he was still alive, so they moved him to a mattress and covered him with a blanket. Prison officials discussed whether they should still hang him, but the doctor assured them that his death was imminent. As it turned out, the doctor was right. Douglas Van Vleck was pronounced dead at 12:32 a.m., 22 minutes after his scheduled execution time. Next up, we have the story of Ernie Walrath and Troy Powell. Powell had been an Army vet and was married to Walrath's sister. Together, the 2 men planned to rob a convenience store, but something went wrong. Powell admitted to delivering the first blow to Newton Wilson, the store clerk, which knocked the man unconscious. Walrath admitted to stabbing Wilson, which ultimately ended his life. Perhaps they thought admitting to their crimes would spare them, but the day after their confessions, they were sentenced to death. On Friday, the 13th of April, 1951, their sentences were carried out in the state's only double execution. In order to hide the execution from prying eyes, the gallows was set up on Yard 2, which is where the outlaws practice baseball. At the ages of 20 and 21, these 2 remain the youngest people executed in Idaho. And finally, we have Raymond Snowden, the first, last, and only person executed in Idaho State Penitentiary's new gallows room. Known as Idaho's own Jack the Ripper, Snowden was sentenced to death for the horrendous killing of Cora Dean, who he stabbed more than 30 times. Though he was convicted of only this one crime, he often bragged about having committed others, which is why he's known by this horrible moniker. As it turns out, this grisly crime was matched by an equally grisly execution. The indoor gallows room was constructed in 2 stories. The top floor featured a hook, which is what the noose would be connected to, and on one wall was a large window. On the other side of that window was where the witnesses would stand and watch the execution being carried out. On the floor of the top room was the trap door, and when open, it would lead to what is called the drop room. Something went wrong in the construction of the gallows room, however, because at the appointed time, witnesses filed into the witness room, including members of Corradine's own family. When the trapdoor opened, the sudden pressure change caused the glass window between the gallows room and the witness room to shatter. In addition, the noose, which was supposed to snap Snowden's neck, did not do its job. Instead, he dangled from the rope, struggling to breathe for 15 long minutes, all within earshot of the witnesses, who could now hear because of the broken window. This execution, which happened on October 18, 1957, was the last execution at Old Idaho State Penitentiary, though far from the last death. He would simply walk right across the hall, and this is the door to the gallows room, which is locked for safety, but we're going to show you what it looks like from the witness room. All right, witnesses, come with me. This way. All right. Line up and you can watch. Welcome, doctor. Are you here to pronounce him dead? Welcome to the one and only indoor gallows where only one inmate was actually put to death. His name was Raymond Snowden, and he died at 12:20 a.m. on October 18th, 1957. A hearse outside the double doors transported his body to a Boise funeral home, and he was buried in the prison cemetery the next day. We hope you enjoyed this 3rd and final episode of the Idaho State Penitentiary Prison Stories. Be sure to subscribe to Miss Kitty's Wild West Adventures, give this video a thumbs up, and hit the bell for notifications. In the meantime, I'll catch you on down the trail.